And now we are. Hi, Ron. Good morning. I'm really excited about today's topic. So let's just do our quick intros and we'll jump in. Hi, everybody watching live or in the future. I'm Ash, Director of Developer Relations at Nylas.
Hi, my name's Rem, and I'm a developer advocate at Nylas.
Cool. So I love this topic you came up with today. This is one of those things that I was learning this as we did our dry run for the stream in real time. I was like, oh, wow. I knew when I was doing it, the anti-pattern that we'll talk about in a moment was an anti-pattern, yet I didn't know that there was an official solve for this particular issue. So without being too mysterious about it, why don't you kind of walk us into what the topic is and why a user would even be thinking about this?
Yeah, so the scenario we're going to go through today, we'll look at a demo maybe towards the end, but we're really going to look at this cases where a development team's working with an NPM package or a Node package, and they come across an issue that they need to modify that package to unblock their development. So either they're building out a feature and they're using an NPM package and they come across an issue and they're like, okay, this is going to block us from deploying with this package. How do we go about working around that?
Yeah, cool. So let's let the cat out of the bag. The anti-pattern, of course, and anyone who's thought about this for a second would know, like this is not the right way to do it, is go into your Node modules directory inside of a project and start editing the code there. Now, I've done that a few times, knowing that that's not the right thing to do, but sometimes you kind of have to do that to make things work in the beginning and then hopefully come up with better solutions. So anyways, it turns out there's actually a baked-in solution to this, and that's what we're going to talk about. So I think as a starter, though, you have a nice sort of like way to walk us through, like, what are the various options, including that anti-pattern, that a developer could potentially take. So maybe we start there.
Yeah, let me just share my screen. And I'm just going to walk through a few options of what we can do when updating an NPM package. And the example I'm going to show is the scenario where, just one sec there. Okay. The scenario where we have a typo. So it's a very contrived or simple example, but it'll help us understand how we can go about resolving for that issue that we come across of having a typo within an NPM package. So the first example that we've talked about, or the scenario, is just updating the package locally. So if you were to update the typo locally, you would actually create a bit more work for your team because it would be hard to distribute that change. So you can't really commit it to Git. And the reason for that is because anytime you were to install your NPM package again, that local update would be reset. So you'd lose that update. The other thing to keep in mind is just how much effort it is to maintain doing a local update. So you'd have to do an update every time you update your NPM, your node modules, or install your NPM packages again. And the next one we're going to look at is just creating a fork. And creating a fork is probably the most common and recommended. I always recommend when you're working with an NPM package, and if you come across an issue, to create a fork and update the changes and then raise a PR against that NPM package. So this helps you contribute to the community and as well unblock your development flow. The only challenge here is you're going to have to wait for that fork or that PR to be merged for you to use the NPM package. So one option here is when you create a fork is you can actually start using the fork within your development flow or within your package.json. So it is easy to distribute because you can just change the NPM package to point to your forked or your created package. However, now you need to maintain that fork over time. So this is why it creates it essentially is not really low effort to maintain because you're always constantly maintaining that forked version of the node module. So the next version that we're going to look at, and this is something that maybe is probably not as well known, is that you can actually create a patch. So a patch, if you can think about it, and we'll look at this when we look at the code, is it's like a git diff that you're applying to an NPM package anytime it's installed. So in the example that we have, you have a typo in an NPM package. You're going to install the NPM package with the typos, and the patch is going to reverse those typos or fix those typos by applying a git diff to the NPM package. So the benefit of this, it's easy to distribute. You just have a git commit that you're going to share with your development team. And as well, it's low effort to maintain because you're not maintaining or having to update the entire package. You're just applying a difference to it each time.
Yeah, so this alone is kind of what I was referring to earlier. The update locally option is definitely the one that I knew as I do this kind of thing that it's not the right thing to do. You sometimes get those feels when you're developing something that you're like, well, I'm going to do this for now because it's necessary, but definitely this doesn't feel maintainable. And the create fork option, of course, is, as you mentioned, like that turns into kind of a forever job, right? Now you've got your own fork. Maybe it'll get you can do a pull request. Maybe it'll get accepted by the maintainers. Maybe it won't, but you're relying on it. And now to get any of those changes from the official project, you're also going to be having to deal with the, kind of managing that over time. So this whole create a patch option, as you mentioned, maybe not well known. I will say that I had no idea about this, so I'm pretty excited about like what you're about to show off here.
Yeah, so let's jump into some code. So we're not going to look at actual functionality, but I'll kind of step you through the repository that we're going to look at and what are the steps we're going to take to actually create a patch. So we're actually going to use our starter repo. So we have a Node starter repo when building with Nylas. Anytime we want to create a sample or any code snippet that we want to share with the general community or with the developers. And in this package, if we look at the index.ts file, we're using two npm packages right now. We're using .m and the Nylas npm package. So I just want to quickly show you the Nylas npm package, and I've actually added a typo here just so we can walk through the steps of creating an actual patch. So we're not going to spend too much time looking at the code. We're just going to focus on the flow of how we can create an actual patch and what that looks like. So let me go to the Nylas npm package. So just on the other screen. And we're just going to take a look at one file in the modules or in the models. It's called event participation. And in event participation, we're going to have, I don't know if I see it here, but let me search for it. It may be down here. OK, so in the event participant file, we have a bunch of properties listed here. And the one property that's misspelled is phone number. It's actually phony number in this case. So we're going to want to update this to be phone number. And we can do this by actually applying a patch. So let's take a look at the steps that we can use to actually create a patch. And we're going to do this using Yarn. So Yarn is a Node package manager. And we're going to look at the Yarn patch command. So what Yarn patch allows you to do is provide any Node module that you want to apply a patch to. So in our case, we're going to apply the patch to the Yarn. We're going to apply it to the Nylas package. So we're going to type Yarn patch Nylas. So it gives us a few things in the output. So let's take a look at the first few lines, and then we'll go ahead with creating an actual patch. So it says that the package was extracted with a success. And what this allows us to do is once it's extracted with a success, we can actually apply a diff or a change to it that can be passed into Yarn to create the actual patch. So the next line is saying you can now edit the following folder. So what Yarn has done is placed the Node module in a separate folder, a temporary folder that it can use to create the actual diff that it's going to apply every time we install this Node module.
And so we should double down on that. This is a temporary folder.
Yeah.
As you can tell just by looking at the path there, that's at the somewhere on the local drive on Ram's computer. So you might think, okay, well, how is this shareable? Well, this is just a temporary place to work. The Yarn's going to apply some magic on a little bit that we'll dig into that shows you how we're not actually going to be reliant on this private /var sort of directory that's deeper into his file system locally.
Yeah. So let's jump into that location. So we're going to type in the code command, and you can install the code command using Visual Studio Code, and it will just open a new Visual Studio Code instance. So we're just going to open up that folder and take a look at what's there. It's asking me if I trust the authors of this folder, and I do. And from here, it's essentially the Node module for Nylas. So we can go in and modify any one of these files to create a patch. So we're going to look for the change that we want to modify. So we want to change any instance where it says phony to phone. So we're going to change phony number to phone number. And it's going to be required in two different files. And one other thing I want to mention, and this is another point that we want to emphasize, is when you're making these changes, you definitely want them to be reviewed by someone else, because you're actually modifying the package that has been built for production. So this code will not look like normal JavaScript code. It'll be built code. So you'll notice that it has different syntax in some cases. So even here, you'll have a different syntax for variables, and this is how the package has been built.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that, of course, is that the module itself, like for on the development side, shout out to our SDK engineer Moose, is all written in TypeScript. So that has to be transpiled down into plain old JavaScript at some point, and so that's why you're not only making changes in the TypeScript file, but since we're not running a build process here, we're also having to go into the source, the sort of transpiled JavaScript code itself and make those changes there too.
Yep, exactly. So now that we've made these changes and saved them, let's go back to our project, and we're just going to follow the next step. So it says, once you're done, run yarn patch, and we're going to create a patch with the temporary folder that we modified the npm package with. So we're going to call this command, and there's going to be no output here, but if we close the terminal and take a look at the file directory, we'll see that we have a folder .yarn, and under .yarn, we have the patches folder. And inside here, we have a patch that's created for the Nylas SDK. And if we take a closer look, we'll see that we start seeing diffs being created. So this means we're removing phony number and we're adding the new line phone number. And this is very comparable to a git diff, where anytime we install the Nylas package or any node package, this patch will be applied on top of the latest Nylas SDK.
Yeah, so like for earlier, we talked about that temporary directory that was deep in your local file system. Well, that was that temporary workspace, but after running that the command to export the patch back into your project, that new .yarn directory that we just saw a moment ago inside of the project, like that's part of what you're going to want to commit to your own version control or source control for the project, and that way everyone when they work on it on their own machines, they're going to get that patch as well.
Yep, exactly. So once you make that commit, there's one more thing you need to consider. Just one more thing I want to point out is we have a resolution property added to the package.json. So anytime anytime the packages or node modules are installed, Yarn will apply this package or will apply this patch to the Nylas package. So you'll have to commit the patch and as well the package.json.
Super cool. And of course, I think you noted this at the outset, but we'll just call out again that like the error in the Nylas SDK that you just patched was a contrived thing that you invented for this example. So folks, if you're out there using our SDK today, you don't need to go and update phony numbers. Those don't exist in the SDK. But by way of example of how to use patches, I think this was like super clear. And I'd assume, Ram, that we could get as complex as we wanted to. It may not be just limited to updating property names. Is that right?
Yeah, the complexity is really up to the development team and the how much work they want to take on. So it's really how much effort you want to maintain going forward. And like we were talking before, I think it's good to have the PR, create the fork, raise the PR, and say this is a change that we need to make in the main repository or the main library. And if you're feeling blocked, definitely use a fork or apply a patch so that you can continue building out and shipping features.
Yeah. So let's talk just a little bit before we close out about like what are situations where you might find that you're going to need something like this.
I think a good scenario here is if you've you've created a fork and you have a PR that's not merged just yet, and you want to be able to continue developing with that functionality. So it could be a modification to a function, a possible regression in a function. A good example that I'm thinking of now is if you have a function that makes an HTTP request, and you just need to add an additional header. So it could be a common mistake that someone misses a header and you want to add it yourself.
Yeah, super cool. So I think that like I just super excited about this because it's just as a node person myself, knowing about the existence of patches is super useful and definitely better than just modifying the source locally and kind of trying to deal with it after that.
Yep.
All right. Well, Ram, thank you so much for walking us through a really cool topic in node module modification land. I hope everyone can get a little bit of use out of this, and hope you have a great Friday.
Happy Friday, everyone.
All right. Take care. We'll see you next week.
See you.